Yeah, so it would seem like what you need is some better books. Welcome to Lena's book surgery. Now, are you sitting down? I don't mean to freak you out, I have some news. The first bit of news is Christmas is coming. The second bit of news is, rumour has it that the publishing industry may run out of paper before Christmas. Unconfirmed articles below, but if you are thinking about buying books for Christmas for yourself or for somebody else, I would just do it now. Like, don't buy any more books than you would have. Like, let's not have a toilet paper 2020 situation, but if you are going to buy books, I would suggest doing it soon, which is why I have opened Lena's book surgery, and I have been receiving some requests, ailments, and questions from my patrons, the Gumption Club, who tip me per video to make all these videos free for you to watch. So every now and then I like to let them into the surgery and help them out. They've been sending me their queries of books they'd like to gift other people for Christmas and asking what they should buy. So I'm going to run through all of them. I know that some people can play water glasses, tap dance, TikTok dance, do raps. My party trick is being able to prescribe people books on the spot, wherever, whatever. So I'm going to showcase that today. I'm not going to go into the kind of depth that I usually do with books, just because we've got a lot of people to serve. This is austerity Britain, guys. The NHS is on its knees. But I am going to give you a little poke into the kind of books that I'm going to be telling you about, and I'm going to leave all of the links to all of the books in the description. And I'm also going to be hanging around in the comments if you have a prescription that you'd like, and answering as many as I possibly can. So let us begin. I need a book for my father who is emotionally detached and could use some therapy. I have a feeling this might be a common ailment. So I have two suggestions. One, if you don't want to say that explicitly with a gift and it's something that's kind of very much not talked about, I would really suggest The Reading List by Sara Nisha Adams. It's a book about a man called Mikesh who loses his wife, and he's kind of realises all of a sudden that he's quite alone in the world, and he has been detached from the world for a while. His children have grown up and he's grieving, but he doesn't really know how to tell people how he feels. And he ends up finding a reading list and going to the library and borrowing some books that his late wife used to love. You can definitely just sell it as, this is an enjoyable read, you'll love it, but it is also about moving from a toxic kind of masculinity to a healthy kind of masculinity and the awkwardness of that, and joining communities, and it's perfect. It's such a good book. But if you have opened up a little bit about that, you might want to check out some of the School of Life books. There is a general School of Life book, but there's also ones on specific topics, and I think they're particularly approachable. They're usually really, really easy to read, and they kind of introduce the idea of thinking more deeply about your emotions without explicitly using the word therapy or anything like that. I need a book for my mum, who has somewhat lost herself in her work during the pandemic and deals with anxiety and doesn't believe in therapy. A lot of her anxiety is tied to the future, specifically because she is so invested in her children and is unable to let go despite us being adults in our 20s. So the first book I wanted to suggest is actually a book that I bought my mum while she was struggling during lockdown, called Wintering. It's a beautiful mix between a memoir and thought experiments and reflections on this idea of taking some time out to deal with your emotions and accepting that life has peaks and troughs and that life is never stable and changes constantly, and how to change with it. It's really, really beautifully written, and my mum loved it, so all mums are the same, no? And also I thought of maybe Untamed by Glennon Doyle. That also deals with some of these things around default centering your children rather than centering yourself a little bit, so that you can be a better person and a better role model for your children, and it sorting out your own identity and separating it from your children. Do you know what I mean? My younger sister has slowly been getting through the graphic novel section in her local bookshop. She usually reads in French, but I would love to get her one in English this time. She loves things that are emotional, positive or negative, and very strong and colourful drawings. She also graduated this year and is slightly lost on what to do next. Would love to hear anyone's recommendation. So for this, I would either suggest Fun Home. The illustrations are quite simple, so it doesn't have that colour bang to it, but they're beautiful. And it's a tragicomic by Alison Bechdel, who is a really kind of famous queer cartoonist, about her life growing up in a funeral home and her weird dynamics with her dad, and quite a bit of it focuses on the awkward transition from being a teenager to being at college and then coming home and kind of being a parent to your parents and working out who you are. A big chunk of Alison's life in that section that it sounds like she also is about to go through is covered in that book, and it's one of the best books I've ever read. It's so good. Or I would say The Invention of Hugo Cabret, which I think is actually originally in French, but obviously you can buy it in English, so if that's something that you can like play with, that would be interesting. And it's really, really chunky, but full of pictures. It's slightly more middle grade YA, but any age can read it. It's kind of like Series of Unfortunate Events kind of territory where anybody would love it. It's got loads of beautiful illustrations in it. It's beautifully written, and it's set in 1930s Paris, and it's about clockmakers and automation and a boy running away and kind of trying to survive and having an adventure. This person is looking for a sex-positive book for a shy young adult Christian. Sensitive to not being comfortable, but also a bit liberating and shame-destroying. Okay, so soft shame transitions. Familiar with this situation. So for this, I'd probably say something like Reputation by Lex Croucher, because it's still set in Regency times, but it's a bit more of an expose about like what the teenagers are really feeling. So it deals with sexual attraction. There is a little bit of like references to sex and like what the main character being quite naive and being confused by other people's sexual reactions around her. And obviously because it's Regency Britain, you don't see that much, but you see way more than you would in a Jane Austen novel, and it's absolutely fab. There's also Red, White and Royal Blue, which I think would be really, really interesting because it deals with a very beautiful love story, basically between the Prince of Britain and the son of the President of the United States. So it's just like a massive romp. Like she'll be distracted by that, and there are some like more sexual parts of it, but the romance and the sex flow together in this really beautiful way. And it also does deal with being shamed for that, and I think it's a really good way to like look at the different ways shame can play out in our societies and how bad it is for anyone to be shamed at all. And then there's also two more because I had loads of ideas about this, but I have to move on. Full Disclosure, which is about a girl living with HIV in a school, and she does musicals, and it's really, really great. And also All the Rage, which is similar to Asking for It, but it's definitely deals on the more shame side of it and the political shame of sex and why that needs to be taken away. And it deals with a small town, small community, probably quite similar to the Christian community that she's grown up in, but that is a little bit more hardcore. So just warnings on that one. It is like, if you're gonna go soft, maybe this isn't the one, but it sounds like it could help. My dad is an antiquarian bookseller and bookbinder, and consequently we have at least 100,000 books at our house. He's also an old white man, and I would love to give him something to read that will encourage him around the world of race and LGBTQIA plus in a not I told you so kind of way. Help please. Loved this question. And I can't believe I need pictures of this 100,000 book household, please. But there's two books I thought of for this. Black and British, which is an incredible history book that covers the whole span of the UK, resurfacing all of the erased black history in Britain. And it's got so many moments of like drama, and you can pop into it and like see how these parts of history link to other parts of history and like map everything out against what you've already learned. And it's really thorough, it's really engaging, and I just think it's a beautiful work of like non-fiction history. And if you get the hardback, it's also really satisfying. If you're somebody who really likes the physicality of books, it's like a good history book. And then I also thought of Vita and Virginia's Letters. So this came out last year, and I did an event around it with Alison Bechdel actually, and it might be good because it anchors the truth of queer history in what has been kind of straight washed. And I don't know if he likes Virginia Woolf or Vita Sackville West, but they were fully in love, and people don't know that. But the letters are there. It's beautiful, and also it's a really beautiful cover. It's a nice one to collect. So I think that could tap into his sense of like, oh, the stuff I already know has another layer to it, rather than just like plopping him in the deep end and like hoping he floats. My partner only ever buys huge dry classics to read because he has the implicit belief they may have more intellectual value than other genres of books. Scandalous. But then he never finishes them because they're so dry. I'd love a recommendation of a book which maybe looks or feels intellectually valuable and deep, but is also actually enjoyable to read. Basically, I want to trick him into reading a book that is fun. I applaud you on this mission, and I want to help you out as much as possible. There's a book that I just read called Still Life, which is set across like loads of decades, starting during the war and ending into the future, all about a soldier who has a chance encounter in Florence and then returns to the East End of London and has this beautiful community of pub people around him, and it kind of like is one of those ensemble narratives that hits on loads of points in history and is also about the rescuing of art in post-war Florence and how important art is, and references a lot of stuff to do with Florence. So if that's something that feels classic and serious to him, but it also it's so funny, there are so many warm-hearted characters, and it's also like got this kind of like Italy meets the East End of London kind of community feel to it that is really beautiful, and it's just, it kind of discusses the importance of art on a real ground level as well as just like for intellectuals. So I think that would be really great for him. And also, has he ever read any Jasper Fforde? Because the Eyre affair kind of crosses over with classical stuff, but is like just a silly romp, like very escapist, like very light, but references a lot of more serious classic books. So he might like that too. I need a book to convince someone using historical examples that we need to be politically active and engaging in order to change things, and that all the other good changes in terms of rights, etc., have been achieved through protest. Basically an antidote to apathy and an answer to, yes, it is all broken, but we can't do anything about it. The book you are looking for is called Hope in the Dark by Rebecca Solnit. You've literally described the blurb of that book. That is the book you're looking for. There's obviously also Humankind, A Hopeful History, or Factfulness, but really I think maybe the main book you're looking for is that Hope in the Dark. My mum loves historical fiction, literary fiction and biographies, especially of Britsy, Churchill. She's reading a 3-part giant biography series of him, ? Sounds like you don't know why. And the Queen. She loved those Philippa Gregory books about the Tudors. Okay, I have 2 suggestions of stuff that she might not have read and would be interested in. How about this book, Godiva by Keris Jones? It's a fictional, I need to stop saying romp in this video, but like I don't know the reason for it. Like, you know, and it's kind of like historical, but it's also like a good journey and there's some like sexy bits in it. Retelling of Godiva, who was a famous medieval figure from Coventry that you may or may not know about, but I really enjoyed it when I read it, and I think it's like a good kind of like, I need some time off from my non-fiction big series books, but I would still like to stay in the historical era, and it sounds like it's a little bit like different from the eras that she's been reading about. Or Incomparable World, which is a book that I'm actually listening to an audiobook right now, and it's by this author called S.I. Martin, who I came across because I attended an event about the intersectional reaction to Bridgerton and like whether it was good or bad. He was speaking on the panel at that event and he was incredible, and so I looked up his book, and he's written this book that's set in the 1780s London of African American soldiers who fought on the side of the British, coming and trying to live in London, and the kind of stuff that they face while they're there. I think that would be really cool because it would probably tie in as some of the history that she already knows, but give her a little bit of a wider scope from the books that she's already reading, and just, you know, it's a great read. Give her a good time. It's great. I'm looking for a book for a friend who just started a career in stage management and loves sci-fi. Well, obviously, it's Station 11. It's got to be Station 11. This is a sci-fi futuristic book. I think it's probably just more futuristic than sci-fi, to be fair, but it has a lot of graphic novel elements to it and kind of like magical elements to it, and a big part of it follows this travelling band of actors in this kind of like dystopian world who are performing King Lear, and it has a lot of kind of stage references in it as well. I think she'd really like it. This one. I need a book for my nan who cannot leave the house anymore, bless her. She loves ghost stories like Woman in Black and detective stories like Agatha Christie, but she's read almost everything in those genres. Nothing too horror-y, and bonus points for a UK setting. When There Were Wolves is a like mystery murder thriller about a woman who is from Australia, and she goes to the Scottish mountains to try and rewild some wolves there, and it's all about the kind of Scottish small village mentality and about them not understanding why they need wolves in Scotland again, and it's very atmospheric. It doesn't have anything too gory in it. Yeah, maybe in a little bit, not really that gory. And it's very fun, and it only just came out, so I guarantee she hasn't read it yet. And then also maybe try her on some crime books by Abir Mukherjee. I think that the kind of themes that you're talking about, she'll probably like really enjoy them, and he is also a Scottish writer. So they're all Scottish recommendations for you, but I think she might enjoy them. Okay, next, I need a book for a person who reads to fall asleep. As few characters as possible. Totally doable. The Housekeeper and the Professor. I've talked about this book before, but Holy Grail, translated book, so good. And then also maybe a poetry pharmacy book. They're like I find poetry really good to read before you sleep, and it also has little paragraphs that are very soothing next to each poem, so they might like that. This one's quite unusual, so I wanted to include this one. I need a book for my friend who is obsessed with reading about melancholy seasides where the weather plays a significant role. Okay, you either need Lorelei, which is absurdist and like a YA book, but like beautifully worded, but also like emphasis on absurdist, that has some really dark elements to it, and is set in Hastings and is all about like mermaids in the sea. Or if you want something that's like genuinely very melancholic, My Aunt is a Pilot Whale, which I read about 10 years ago and has stayed with me ever since. I want to say even 15 years. I definitely got that out of the library when I was a teenager, and then I reread it late. Anyway, it's a good book, definitely ticks all the melancholy seaside boxes. Check it out. I need a book for my teenage sister who has really got into science, and I want to fuel those flames. Okay, you either need Transcendent Kingdom, main character works as a very legit, very successful scientist, and about half of the book is set in a laboratory, or maybe Lab Girl does what it says on the tin. Okay, this is getting really long. So maybe we'll just do one more. I need a book for my partner who loves leftist politics, the history of colonisation and religious history. Bonus points if it's easily annotatable, as I'd like to annotate it for him before I give it to him. Woo! That is such a cute gift idea. I love that. So you're going to need God Is Not a White Man. Great mix of manifesto memoir plus loads of colonial and church history mixed together. So that's two of them meshed, and really good. Again, he won't have read it. It just came out. Or Talking to My Daughter About the Economy, which has a beautiful cover in hardback, and I think would be a really, really nice gift, and like would be nice to annotate, because I bet you'd have loads of thoughts on. It's kind of like a brief history of capitalism with some like storytelling and mythology weaved into it. It's amazing. And the gift edition I checked for you is available secondhand, and I'm going to leave the links to that below because the gift edition is. Okay, here endeth the surgery, but I will be below in the comments to try and recommend you more. Pop in there and we'll all swap recommendations. Go in, if you have loads of like books that you want to tell people about, go into the comments and reply to people and tell people what they should buy each other for Christmas. Buy people books for Christmas, it's always the best. The book industry has floated, the bookshops have just about floated through the last 2 chaotic years for the industry, but something that really does need supporting are debut authors. I think the average like wage of an author in the UK is around £14,000 at the moment, and it's definitely much lower for debut authors who have had their books coming out in this period. Mostly people who have been buying books have been going back to like classics and like authors that are dead, which we love, but also it means that like while the industry is floating a bit, debut authors are like they need your coin is what I'm telling you. So if you are thinking about buying a present and you want it to be a book, do consider that as well. But thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to watch more book videos, they're here. If you want to watch some other videos, they're here. Thank you so much to the Gumption Club who tip me per video to make sure all of these videos are possible and free. I got this garter with this costume and I was not going to wear it on my thigh, but I am going to ping it in your face now. Frog Snog out.